Hi everyone, it's Cassie, the young teen librarian at East Hampton Library. Tonight we are continuing with reading through Cheaper by the Dozen, and we are continuing with Chapter 18, Motorcycle Mac. Once the ice was broken, Anne started having dates fairly often, and Ernestine and Martha followed suit. Dad acted as chaperone whenever the pressure of business permitted. Although he had decided that Joe Scales was small enough to be above suspicion, he had no confidence in the football heroes and other sheiks who soon were pitching their tents and woo upon the premises. When Dad couldn't act as chaperone himself, he sent Frank or Bill along as his proxy. "It's bad enough to have you tagging along on a date," Ernestine told Dad, "but to have a kid brother squirming and giggling on the back seat is simply unbearable. I don't know why the boys in school bother with us." "Well, I know, even if you don't," Dad said. "And that's exactly why Frank and Bill are there. And let me tell you, if those sheiks would stop bothering you and find some other desert to hunt, it would suit me just right." Frank and Bill didn't like the chaperone job any more than the girls liked having them for chaperones. "For Lord's sake, Daddy," Frank complained, "I feel just like a third wheel sitting in the back seat all by myself." "Well, that's just what you're supposed to be, the third wheel. I don't expect you to be able to thrash those fullbacks if they start trying to take liberties with your sisters, but at least you'll be able to run for help." The girls complained to Mother, but as usual, she sided with Dad. "If you ask me," Anne told her, "it's a dead giveaway to be as suspicious as Daddy. It denotes a misspent youth." "Well, nobody asked you," Mother said, "so perhaps you'd better forego any further speculation. It's not a case of suspicion. Just because other parents won't face up to their responsibilities is no reason for your father or me to forget ours." At the dances, Dad would sit by himself against a wall, as far away from the orchestra as possible, and work on papers he had brought along in a briefcase. At first, no one paid much attention to him, figuring perhaps that if he was ignored, he might go away. But after a few months, he was accepted as a permanent fixture, and the girls and boys went out of their way to speak to him and bring him refreshments. People, even sheiks, couldn't be around Daddy without liking him. And Daddy couldn't be in the midst of people without being charming. "Do you see what's happening?" Anne whispered to Ernestine one night, pointing to the crowd around Dad's chair. "By golly, he's become the belle of the high school ball. What do you think of that?" "I think it's a pain in the neck," Ernestine said. "But it's kind of cute, isn't it?" "Not only cute, it's our salvation. You wait and see." "What do you mean?" "When Daddy gets to know the boys and sees that they're pretty good kids, he'll decide the chaperone business is a waste of time. He really hates being here, away from Mother, and if he can find a way to quit gracefully, he'll quit." Dad resigned to chaperone the next day at Sunday dinner. "I'm all through wet nursing you," he told the girls. "If you want to go to the dogs, or at any rate to the tea-hounds, you're going to have to go by yourselves from now on. I can't take any more of it." "They're really not bad kids, are they, Daddy?" Anne grinned. "Bad kids? How do I know whether they're bad kids? Naturally they behave when I'm around, but that's not the point. The point is they're making a character out of me. They're setting me up as the meddlesome but harmless old duffer, a kind of big-hearted, well-meaning, asinine mental eunuch. The boys slap me on the back and the girls pinch me on the cheek and ask me to dance with them. If there's anything I hate, it's a daddy-long-legs kind of father like that." He turned to Mother. "I know it's not your fault, boss, but things would have been a whole lot easier if we had had all boys, like I suggested, instead of starting out with the girls." From that day on, about the only contact Dad had with the sheiks was over the telephone. "Some simpleton with pimples in his voice wants to speak to Ernestine," he grumbled to Mother when he answered the phone. "I'll swear I'm going to have that instrument taken out of here. These tea-hounds are running me crazy. I wish they'd sniff around someone else's daughters for a while and give us some peace." Libby Holton, one of the girls in Anne's class, was from Mississippi and had only recently moved with her family to Montclair. She was pretty, mature for her age, and even the straight silhouette styles couldn't hide her figure. She was a heavy painter and wore the highest heels and the shortest skirts in school. She looked like everything Dad said his daughter shouldn't look like. Libby was charming and popular. She and Anne became good friends, and Anne finally had her over for lunch. Libby's place was next to Dad's, and she was loaded with perfume. You could smell it the minute she walked into the house. Knowing how Dad disliked makeup and perfume, we were afraid he was going to make Anne's friend change her place at the table, or worse still, order her to go upstairs and wash herself. We might have saved ourselves the worry, because it soon became apparent that while Dad didn't like perfume on his own daughters, he didn't object to it on other people's daughters. "My, that smells good," he told Libby after he had been introduced. "I'm glad you're going to sit right here next to me, where I can keep an eye and a nose on you." "Why, I declare," said Libby. "Anne Gilbreth, you hussy you, why didn't you tell me you had such a gallant daddy, and so handsome too?" "Oh boy," groaned Bill. Libby turned to Bill and dropped him a slow, fluttering wink. "Ain't I the limit?" she laughed. "Oh boy," said Bill, but this time it was more of a yodel than a groan. Both Anne and Libby worked hard on Dad all during lunch. He saw through them, but he enjoyed it. He imitated Libby's southern accent, called her honey child and you all, and outdid himself telling stories and jokes. "I heard from some of the other girls in school about how cute you were," said Libby. "They said the nicest things about you, and they said you used to come to all the dances too." "That's right, and if I had known about the Mississippi invasion, I would have started going to the dances all over again." After dessert, we sat around the table wondering what came next. We knew, and so did Dad, that it was a build-up for something. Just as Dad finally pushed back his chair, Anne cleared her throat. "You know, Daddy, there's something I've been wanting to ask you for a long time." And now, having been flattered, fattened, and fussed over, the sucker is led forward for the shakedown, Dad grinned. "Well, speak up, girls. What is it?" "Why don't you take this afternoon off and teach Libby and me how to drive the car? We're almost old enough to get licenses, and it would be a big convenience for the whole family if someone besides you knew how to drive." "Is that all? You didn't need all the sweet talk for that. I thought you were going to ask me to let you spend the weekend at Coney Island or something." He looked at his watch. "I'm going to have to put some more neat's foot oil on the clutch. I'll have the car out front in exactly 12 minutes. Libby and Anne both threw their arms around his neck. "I never thought he'd do it," Anne said. "I told you he'd say yes," Libby grinned. "Mr. Gilbreth, you're a sweet old duck." She planted a kiss on his cheek, leaving two red lipstick smears. The girls rushed out of the dining room to get ready, and Dad rolled his eyes. "Well, Lily," he said to his mother, "I guess my spring chicken days are over. When you start getting pecks on the cheek from your daughter's friends, you're on the decline." "The first thing I know, you'll be greasing your hair and wearing one of those yellow slickers," Mother admonished him with mock severity. "Better wash the lipstick off your face before you go out, Cheek." Dad grinned vacantly and walked so that his pants cuffs swished like Oxford bags. "I'm going out and take the fenders off Foolish Carriage," he said. "4 wheels, no brakes. The tin you love to touch." Frank, Bill, and Lillian, still in junior high school, resented the infiltration of the high school Romeos. What they objected to principally was that the 3 oldest girls were being turned away from family activities. Anne, Ernestine, and Martha had less and less time for family games, for plays and skits. It was the inevitable prelude to growing up. It was just a few bars, if you please, Professor, of that sentimental little ditty entitled, "Those wedding bells are breaking up that old gang of mine." Marriage was still in the distant future, but the stage was being set. Anne already had had her first proposal. Joe Scales had asked her to marry him. They were sitting in a hammock on the side porch when he popped the question. The porch was separated by French doors from the parlor and by windows from the office. Frank, Bill, and Lillian, lying flat on the parlor floor and peeking through the doors, bore witness to the proposal and to Anne's none too original rejection. "I like to think of you as a brother," she told Scales. "A fine thing," Frank whispered to Bill. "Imagine thinking of that wet smack in terms of us." "You caught me," Scales told Anne. "I went for you, hook, line, and sinker. What are you going to do with me?" Anne was touched by the show of slavish devotion. "What am I going to do with you?" she echoed dramatically. "Throw him back," Dad roared from the other side of the office window. "He's too small to keep."